Hello, folks. J. Scott Phillips here, and tonight we are bound for murder. Murder! With a look at Ellery Queen's very first Ellery Queen novel, The Roman Hat Mystery, first published back in 1929 by Frederick A. Stokes Company. And this is an offering of mine to March Mystery Madness, now in its 10th year on BookTube, and it is an event that was originally created by Lizzie Faye Loves Books and Troy Towell a decade ago, and it's to celebrate mystery fiction in all its forms, whether it's police procedurals or detective novels or any kind of mystery you might want to read all month long. Now, they do have a theme, and it is mysteries through the decades, and they've got a few different ways of spinning that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that number 10 and go back 10 decades to the 1920s. That's when this book was written in 1929. It was written in 1928, published in 1929. And by my best calculations, based on some kind of obvious clues in the book, although they try to make it ambiguous, is set in 1923. So we're definitely back in the 1920s here. And for mood, I've got my hollow statue right here to kind of set the era for me. And I guess I should admit right up front, Ellery Queen, I have never read any Ellery Queen before in my life. Kind of embarrassing to say that. Not for any particular reason. I just never got to them. And the only thing I knew until I read this book over the last week, all I knew about Ellery Queen was that it was the pen name of a couple of, I thought, brothers, but they were cousins, that wrote together under the pen name Ellery Queen, and that Ellery Queen was the name of their main character, their main detective. And then, of course, I knew about Ellery Queen magazine, and I don't think I ever read that either, oddly enough, over all these years. I may have read some short stories or articles or something that might have first been published in Ellery Queen magazine, but if I have, I don't know that for sure. So it's a wash, really. But I have read this book now, so we'll get into my thoughts and reactions to my first exposure to Ellery Queen. And I came up with the idea of reading this book really going back a month ago during Holmes is Where the Heart Is. And I believe that it was Jim on his channel, Mystery and Mayhem. He was taking us on a little bookshelf tour through his Sherlock Holmes pastiche novels. And one of them was by Ellery Queen, and I think it was called Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper. And that sounded interesting to me. I've always been a huge Sherlock Holmes fan, and so that would have been fun to read, but I thought, if I'm going to read Ellery Queen, I should start at the beginning and read what he's best known for. And so that would be an Ellery Queen novel. So I thought March Mystery Madness is coming up. I'll just wait another couple weeks and read Ellery Queen for March Mystery Madness. And as I say, the book was first published in 1929. And I came across this great edition here. This is a 50th anniversary a facsimile reprint published by Otto Penzler, no less. And so I knew right away that the quality of this book was going to be pretty high and also authentic. So, and it really is, right down to all the cover art and all the indicia inside, everything. So at least, never having read Ellery Queen before, I can at least pretend that it's 1929 once again. I'm back in the 20s, and I'm reading the first edition of Ellery Queen from the very beginning. So, as I usually like to do on my channel, other than just talk about the book itself, is also talk about cover art. And sticking with that theme of 10, I thought, well, I don't believe this book has ever been out of print. Let's take a look at 10 covers down through the decades, and we'll do that at the end of the video here. But first, let's look at a little background of how the book itself first got to be written and published and some of the background of Ellery Queen himself. Or should I say, Ellery Queen themselves. Anyway, let's take a look. Ellery Queen, as I say, was the pen name shared by two cousins, both born in Brooklyn, Frederic Dannay and Manfred Bennington Lee, or sometimes just Manfred B. Lee. And Lee, although he was born in Brooklyn, he spent the first 12 years of his life growing up in Elmira, New York. So he had a bit of a Mark Twain influence all around him in those days. Then when he was 12 years old, his family moved back to Brooklyn. And then from there on, he and his cousin, Frederick, they grew up as close as brothers. Lee was the older of the two, and he was born Emanuel Lepovsky on January 11th, 1905. And then 9 months later, Dannay was born David Nathan on October 20th, 1905. And in both cases, their mothers gave their sons different first names, but their attending physicians didn't believe they were appropriate first names for Jewish boys and changed them without consenting their mothers on their birth certificates. And so later on, both cousins adopted names of their own choosing. Now, flash forward to when they were about 23 years old, and as you can see by the photo here, they look pretty good for a couple of young men of 23. But they met for lunch one day in June of 1928 at a Midtown Manhattan restaurant. And one of them, and when they were interviewed years later, neither of them could remember which one it was, but one of them had seen an announcement in the New York Times for a $7,500 mystery novel writing contest, co-sponsored by McClure's magazine and the Frederick A. Stokes Publishing Company. So as a lark, they decided right there during lunch that they were going to enter this contest. They could use an extra $7,500 between them. That was a lot of money in those days. And by the end of lunch, they had even come up with the basic idea of a plot. So they had until December 31st of that year, 1938, to finish the story and turn it in. And so they spent the next 6 months getting together at each other's houses and offices and writing this novel together and getting it all refined, polished it all up. Well, somewhere along the line, of course, they needed a name for their character, their detective. And young Daniel Nathan, or Frederic Dannay as he would come to be known, spent, as I said, he spent the first 12 years of his life growing up in Elmira, New York, and his best friend while living there, his name was Ellery. And Dannay also admired magazine editor Ellery Sedgwick and poet William Ellery Leonard. So the name Ellery was kind of floating to the top here. And then one weekend while they were working on this novel, they were playing cards together and they were thinking of what their detective's name could be. So they had Ellery, and then they were thinking as they were playing cards, they thought, well, are the face cards? Maybe the face cards would give them some kind of an idea. And they thought Ellery King. But King didn't sound quite right, but Ellery Queen struck the right tone, so they decided on that. Now, the $7,500 prize was going to be split between McClure's magazine, which was offering $5,000 for the serialization rights, and Stokes $2,500 for the hardcover rights. And the contest was open to everybody, professionals and amateurs alike. And so to keep it fair, the editors and publishers here demanded that any entry would only be submitted under a pseudonym, so that would kind of level the playing field. So nobody had an advantage whether they had been published before or not. And so now the two cousins had to come up with yet another name, a pen name. What would it be? And they started thinking, well, Sherlock Holmes is being written by Arthur Conan Doyle. Everyone remembers Sherlock Holmes, but people didn't really remember the name Arthur Conan Doyle so much. They might think Dr. Watson, but they're not going to think Arthur Conan Doyle. They're going to think Sherlock Holmes. So they thought, what if we name what if we have our pseudonym the actual name of the character, Ellery Queen. So people, if they remember the detective's name, like Sherlock Holmes, they'll remember Ellery Queen. They will also then automatically remember the author's name, or at least the pen name, Ellery Queen. So it's kind of funny because, you know, Sherlock Holmes was supposedly written by Dr. Watson, but it wasn't really. Ellery Queen now is going to be written by Ellery Queen, although it isn't really. But anyway, that was their plan. So they came up with their pen name. They finished up their story on December 30th, submitted it on December 31st, the last day that they were accepting entries, and then they just sat back and waited. So now it's March, and the two cousins are having lunch together or something again one day, and one of them says to the other, "Hey, whatever happened to that story we wrote? Have you heard anything? I haven't heard anything. What's going on?" So Dannay decides he's going to call the agent at the publishers. And the agent answers, and he asks, "Well, what pseudonym was your story under?" And Dannay says, "Ellery Queen." And the agent says, "Can you get in here right away?" And Dannay says, "And how?" So he grabs his cousin, and off they go to the agent's office. And they get up there, and they said, "Well, there's good news. You guys won. Ellery Queen won the contest. We're about to announce it, so the announcement should be out in a few days. And then we can do things formally here. But congratulations." So great. And again, no word, no announcement. So they call the agent up again, and the agent answers and says, "Can you guys come in here right away?" And they say, "And how?" And they headed straight over there. And when they get there, the agent says, "Oh, I got bad news. McClure's magazine has gone bankrupt." Oh, no. So now the rug is pulled out from under him. But McClure's had been bought out by another publisher, a magazine called The Smart Set. And the new editors had decided they were going to continue with the contest, but they were awarding the prize, the $7,500 prize, to a different author, because the Smart Set had more of a female readership, and they wanted a mystery that would appeal more to their basic audience, the female readers. So Ellery Queen now was out of luck. However, Stokes, Frederick A. Stokes, the publisher of the book end of this deal, said that they still wanted to go ahead with the story. They wanted to buy the story from them anyway and print it, but unfortunately they could only advance a paltry $200. If they were okay with that, then they would print the book anyway. And so the cousins are thinking, well, this is a shame, but we'll do it. The $200 isn't what we had big plans for that $7,500, but we'll take the $200. But if you could at least do this for us, once the other author's book is serialized and it's going to be printed then as a book, could you at least print our story first before that other book comes out? If you could do us that favor, then we agree, and we'll go with the advance of $200. So Stokes agreed to that, and The Roman Hat Mystery was published on August 15th, 1929, and then a few months later, the grand prize winner was published. That was the book Murder Yet to Come by Isabel Briggs Myers. And that is how The Roman Hat Mystery came to be written and published, and how 96 years later, I finally came to read this book at long last. As a novice Ellery Queen reader, I was in for a lot of surprises. I should start off by saying I really enjoyed this book. I had a lot of fun reading it. I enjoyed the structure of it, some of the little literary devices. A couple of things threw me. We'll get into those here. But I should admit that this is the third take of me doing this section here. In my enthusiasm here, I felt like I was explaining too much of the plot, taking too long, and revealing some spoilers. And I don't want to do that. In case you haven't read this book yourself, and I'm assuming that after you watch this video here, you're going to want to read this book. So I'm going to try to give nothing away here. And now the book was written in 4 parts. So I'll just split this next section up here into 4 parts. So without further eloquence, here we go. Now, the 4 parts of this book are not of equal length. They're longer up front, I guess, to establish the characters and build the exposition here. And then they get shorter and shorter as the book progresses and the momentum gets going towards the final solution here. But I'm going to just talk about some of the important characters here that I believe continue on into future books, and not really focus too much on some of the suspects and other people involved in the mystery here. But the book starts off with a foreword, actually before part 1, written by someone who signs their name as J.J. McC, initial C, McC. And it's a confusing character to me because J.J. McC does not participate in the book itself. This is someone who supposedly was an associate of Richard and Ellery Queen. Now, I guess I should back up a little bit here, because Richard Queen is Inspector Richard Queen, who is a senior inspector on the New York Police Department. And he turns out actually to be the main detective. That surprised me. I was expecting Ellery Queen to be the main character and the main detective. Not the case, at least not in this first book. That might change in future books. I don't know. But this J.J. McC was an associate of theirs back in New York some years before the opening of this mystery. And at the opening of this mystery, Richard and Ellery Queen have actually retired to a little mountain villa somewhere in Italy. We're not told where, other than it's just somewhere in Italy. And J.J. McC is on vacation, and he's traveling through Europe for several months, and he drops in on the Queens in their little mountain villa. And it turns out that Ellery Queen is a mystery writer, not just a detective, but a mystery writer of some renown, and has written a number of famous mysteries, but under another name. Don't know if the other name is his real name or not, but J.J. McC figures that there must be some more manuscripts, and so he keeps cajoling Ellery into, you have other manuscripts. What's your latest manuscript? And Ellery doesn't want to reveal this, but he's just nagged so much that he finally opens a vault and produces a manuscript of the Roman Hat mystery. And so this is what J.J. McC was after. He wants to take that manuscript back to New York with him and get it published. And Ellery doesn't seem to want that to be the case, but he finally agrees to that. But he demands that it not be published under his own name or his own established pen name, whatever that is. We're not told what that is. But he has constructed this name, Ellery Queen, that is supposedly has no clue in it to his actual identity. So it's an anonymous pen name, Ellery Queen, and then that's the name that the book will be written by, and the name of his character in the story. And then, of course, his father, Richard Queen, Inspector Richard Queen, is not his real name either. Not sure what this extra layer is all about. Why isn't it just by Ellery Queen? We don't know. Or why doesn't Ellery Queen, if he's a writer, why does he not want this published? It's confusing. And then who is this J.J. McC? He doesn't figure in this story at all, other than telling you up front that he writes the story. He doesn't appear as a character anywhere in the book. So that's odd. Anyway, so moving on to the story then, it takes place in it starts on a Monday, September 24th, I think, 1920 dash. They don't tell you the year, but the fact that you know that they give you a specific date on a Monday, and if you look at calendars from the 1920s, there is only one year that has that date on a Monday, and that's 1923. I don't know why they keep it anonymous if they're going to the trouble of giving you the day of the week, because that kind of narrows it way down. But anyway, I found that interesting. And then so now getting into the story. The story is about a murder in an off-Broadway theater. And it's during the second act, close to the end of the second act of this play called Gunplay. And it's on a Monday evening, as I said. And this nefarious attorney, Monty Field, is murdered during the play. And at first, they're describing the play. It sounds pretty interesting. It's got a lot. It's kind of a gangland story, kind of a story of the New York underworld. And there are a lot of, as the title of the play would kind of insinuate, a lot of gunplay. So there are actual gunfire throughout the show, and there could be pistols, Tommy guns, you name it. They're all rattling off throughout the play. And so when I first read that description, I thought, here's what's going to happen. There's going to be gunfire going on in the play that will then mask the actual gunfire out in the audience, so no one will notice or pay any attention to someone getting shot. And we know that Monty Field is sitting in the very back row of the orchestra section, way on the left side, so he's way out of the way. But I was wrong about that, of course. It turns out that after somebody trips over the body in the dark as they're trying to go use the restroom or something, they trip over the dying body of Monty Field, and then they call for a doctor after he dies. And there's always a doctor in the house, pronounced dead by poison. So the gunfire really had nothing to do with that. So it's a very peculiar poison. We won't get into that really here. Spoiler free. I'm trying. But they call in the police, and Inspector Richard Queen is the man in charge. And so there are cops and other detectives, but he is the guy running the show here. And so he calls in his son, Ellery Queen, who is also a detective extraordinaire. Although Ellery seems to just linger in the background. I was kind of surprised by that. Now, I liked Ellery right away because he was called in. He wasn't at home when they called him in. He was out at a bookseller's. There was this specific first edition that he was salivating over, and he was negotiating to buy this first edition. So as a reader and book lovers, I think readers of Ellery Queen are going to want to like Ellery Queen right away because he's one of us, right? But he doesn't really take much of a hand in the case here in the first part. He's kind of standing off to the side. He'll throw out a little notion or idea every so often, but it's really Richard Queen who's calling the shots, running the show, calling for interviews with people. They've locked the theater down, and he's going through all the people in the audience, some of the cast members, and some of the staff of the theater that seem like they might be suspicious in what's going on. And so that's setting up some of our characters, some of our clues, and some of our red herrings right off the bat. They don't really deduce anything at all, except that there's one interesting key point in this case so far, and that is that everyone knows that Monty Field, the murder victim here, he was dressed to the nines to go out to the theater. He was dressed appropriately in his dress clothing and silk top hat. And that is the Roman hat mystery. The Roman part of this is this play takes place at the Roman Theater. That's the off-Broadway theater. And his top hat has disappeared. Everyone saw him wearing it earlier in the evening, and now that they're investigating this crime, it appears to be gone. Why is that? There must be some important clue on that, or the murderer wouldn't have taken it away. So they try to lock the theater down, and they're checking everybody's ticket stubs to see where they were sitting so they can kind of track movements during the play if anyone saw somebody sitting near Monty Field. And they're checking who is dressed appropriately with a top hat, who isn't, so that they're checking everyone. They're not taking out somebody else's hat out of the theater. They got this place locked down. And that sets up the story here now, and that brings us to the end of part 1. Now, the end of part 1 and on down through the book, always the ends of these parts always seem to be kind of a get-together of Richard and Ellery Queen together, and they kind of sum up the case to date. So where are we so far? What do we know? What do we don't know? What do we need to find out? And kind of gives the reader these little helping hands along the way. But at the same time, I think there's some misdirection going on. So now on to part 2. Oh, before we move on to part 2, I got to back up a little bit here. At the beginning of the, after the foreword, but before part 1, we have what you would often see in a lot of mystery books back in those days, is a list of the characters up front. And Ellery Queen calls it the lexicon of persons that are involved in the case here. And there's a note by Ellery Queen after that little preamble there by J.J. McC. Now we have Ellery Queen giving the reader some notification that here are a list of all the people that are involved and are suspects, of people involved in the investigation, and a little line, a little description for you to keep referring to, because Ellery does not want to be accused later on of writing this book unfairly, that he's not hiding anything, that anytime during you reading this book, you are to refer as often as you want to back to that list of characters. That's by Ellery Queen telling us that. If he didn't want this published, I don't know why he's giving his instructions now on how to read his book. But that's what he's doing, and I did like that. I was going back to that list time and time again throughout reading the book. And then he also does us the favor of drawing a sketch, a diagram, a map of the theater, of the orchestra section and the stage, and then marking where all the different pertinent seats are. Important people were sitting in this seat, that seat, where certain ushers were stationed by exit doors, things like that, which I also found very useful and kept going back to. I just don't know why, if Ellery Queen didn't want to publish this book, why he's giving us, the reader, so many instructions and little crutches to help us along the way. Okay, now on to part 2. Now, as I say, part 1 was the night of the murder. Everything in that part all happened at the theater. Now, part 2 starts on Tuesday morning, the next morning, and then we'll cover Tuesday and Wednesday of this investigation. And on Tuesday morning, the reader is invited over to the Queen's apartment, and it's an old brownstone on the Upper East Side, I believe. So we were invited to breakfast there with those guys and get to hang around with them. And we are introduced to their young, I think I would say around 15 or 16-year-old houseboy, Juna. Now, we're not really given much background about Juna at all, but we know that he's fairly young and he's very enthusiastic. He's kind of a wise guy, and there's a lot of comedic banter between the Queens and Juna, and between Juna and the Queen's associates as well, particularly the detectives that he's gotten to know. An odd little exchange happens here at the beginning of part 2, in the first chapter of part 2, and I'll just read it here because it kind of threw me a little bit. But Juna is answering the phone that morning, and it's one of the detectives trying to get a hold of Inspector Queen. And I'll just read this to you here. It says, so he's answering the phone. Inspector Queen may not be disturbed, sir, unless his man Juna knows who's calling. Juna, who knew Sergeant Veely's voice especially well, grinned and stuck his tongue in his cheek. A slim hand firmly grasped Juna's neck and propelled him halfway across the room. The inspector, fully dressed, his nostrils quivering appreciatively with his morning's first ration of snuff, said into the mouthpiece, "Don't mind Juna, Thomas. What's up? This is Queen talking." Now, what's with that grabbing Juna by the neck and throwing him halfway across the room? That seems a little aggressive. Now, in context, I get the idea that it's just playful shenanigans here, but it sounds a little extreme without knowing these characters at all. But it also brings up Richard Queen's his affection for snuff. A lot of snuff in this book here. Every page, it seems, or at least every other page, Richard is taking a hit from his little snuff box there, and then half the time he sneezes loudly after that. I don't think I've ever seen snuff come up so much in a book. A lot of cigars in books and mysteries, other books from back in those days, pipes from time to time. Snuff is a new one to me, especially to this degree. But anyway, I really enjoy the character of Richard Queen. I guess I could have said in part one here that during that part, he's interviewing a lot of the possible suspects. And he changes his personality depending on who he's questioning. He'll be either a tough guy or kind of a fatherly type of guy who's trying to give advice, or some other approach to questioning people. You never really know how he's going to attack somebody with his questioning, or if he's going to seem easygoing or not. It kind of plays good cop and bad cop. I found that really interesting. But when he's not doing that, he is just really a very likable character. And one thing I should also say, which is I was not expecting this, usually in these kinds of mysteries, the main detective is the smart guy, and then all the other detectives are sort of bumblers and kind of stupid. Not in this case, at least at this point in the story here. All the detectives and the cops, everybody on the law enforcement side, all work together. They all respect each other, and they seem very friendly with each other. So that was refreshing, I thought. Ellery now is he still doesn't want to participate really in this. He's still lurking in the background. He will still be throwing out his little comments and asides that, according to Inspector Queen, he's the brains. Ellery is the brains of the two of them here. And so he's throwing out these subtle little comments that we, the reader, go, okay, well, that's interesting. But Richard Queen is getting ideas from this. And so we have to figure out how those two are thinking, how they are communicating with each other. But Ellery, it seems like he wants to be anywhere else. He is worried about that first edition. He wants to get back to his bookseller. Otherwise, that first edition is going to slip through his fingers. And I'm not sure I really care for that. And I'm coming to realize that Ellery is not the main detective. Richard is the main detective. And well, again, I don't want to give any spoilers here. But again, at the end of this part, they kind of sum up what they know, what they don't know, and then it moves on to part 3. I guess I should say one more thing, and that is during Tuesday and Wednesday of the story here, they're running all over town now. They're not in the theater. They're running to different suspects' offices, apartments, family gatherings, all these kinds of things, and try to gather as much information and clues as they can. They're even coming across associates of people that they talked to at the theater the night before. And so other characters or suspects or motives or methods or something tied to the murder here are starting to build some kind of a story here. We just can't figure out. At least I could not figure anything out. I had an idea about this missing hat. The hat is still missing, and they're more and more desperate to find this thing. And by the end of part 2, they're convinced it has to still be in the theater. It must have been hidden somewhere. And I was coming up with some ideas about, I think I know where a top hat could be lurking in a theater where it would just go unnoticed. That's all I'm working on. And then that and the poison. We're given a really good description of what this poison is and how it's made and that kind of a thing. So I have that. I have a kind of a working theory at this point of what that might be. But how the missing hat and the poison tie together, no clue. So we'll leave it at that and move on to part 3. Part 3 covers Thursday and Friday of the investigation. And as of the end of part 2, still no sign of that missing top hat. So they're convinced that it must still be in the theater. Now, I should have said before that Inspector Queen ordered the theater shut down. The play is closed and the theater is locked up tight until they have a chance to solve this murder. And so that might take a few days. The general manager and the producers of the play are not happy about that, but they're complying with police orders. Now, Inspector Queen has delegated the search in the theater for the top hat to some of his detectives and some of the cops, as well as certain trusted people of the cleaning staff of the theater. But so far, they've turned up nothing. It's got to be there. So now Inspector Queen and Ellery are going to go to the theater themselves and search it top to bottom and see if they can find that hat. And they talked to a Mrs. Phillips, which I was kind of happy to see that name pop up there. Mrs. Phillips, if this is 1923, that would have been my second wife. So we find out some things about her that I didn't know before. One is that she was in charge of wardrobe for the theater. So that started to support my theory of where a top hat might be lurking in a theater that would go unnoticed. Ellery talks to Mrs. Phillips, but we don't know what they say. And by the end of their trip to the theater, we don't know. Maybe we're supposed to glean something, but we come out of that theater, I think, without finding a hat, or at least the hat. So then on Friday, now they are going to go to the murder victim's home. They're looking for something. There's a couple of things that they're looking for, other things that popped up in the investigation that must be there somewhere. And if they can find that hat, that will tie some things together. And as the reader, we are starting to piece some things together as to how that hat will come into play in identifying whoever the murderer might be. I'll just leave it at that. But now, at the end of part 3, I guess I should say, Ellery is still hankering for that damn first edition. He won't let that go. And again, he is still kind of just lurking in the background, throwing out little asides here and there. But it's Richard who's carrying the ball here, it seems. And so I'm becoming disappointed with Ellery Queen. Of all the characters, not just Inspector Queen and Juna, and I would say all of the suspects and some of the cops and everything, they're all really interesting characters. And it's fun to see how Ellery Queen, the cousins, are writing this to build those backstories of all these characters, who might be associated and who could not be. And you're given a lot to chew on, but there's all these little threads and things that might connect here, but it might. So lots of fun to read. And I have to say that of all the characters in the book, Ellery Queen, to me, is the least interesting, unfortunately. But still a great book to read, having a lot of fun. And maybe Ellery evolves into something more in later books, perhaps. But at the end of part 3, again, we wind up with the two queens talking to each other and kind of summing things up. And now I feel like I'm in trouble because Inspector Queen he's just so frustrated at the end of the Friday night here, because he tells us that he knows who did it. He knows how it was done and he knows why it was done. But he's frustrated because that's all that we can do. Well, isn't that the whole ball of wax right there? Those 3 things, case solved, right? But no, because he doesn't have the physical evidence that would stand up in court. So he just feels checkmate at this point. And Ellery is agreeing with him, and he says, well, but I wish I could stay longer, but I'm going on vacation tomorrow. Ellery's going to leave town. He's got tickets on the train in the morning, Saturday morning, out of Penn Station to go fishing in Maine. So on Friday morning, well, that's part 4. We'll get into that here in a second. But before we get to part 4, there's just a half a page, again, written to the reader by J.J. McC. And this is an interesting page here. I like this device that they put in there. I just don't know why it's this J.J. McC and not Ellery Queen, who has given us the map and the list of characters and all that. But this is the challenge to the reader. And we are told in this half a page copy here that we now have all the pertinent facts that should allow us to solve the crime. We have everything we need to know. And we are told that we need to identify the murderer. We need to explain why the murder was committed and how it was committed. Now, Inspector Queen just told us that he knows all that, but we still don't have the physical evidence. And so we feel, at least I felt like I'm still missing a lot of bits here. Doggone it. I just realized as I'm editing this here that I left out something that I kind of wanted to get in here. And so I'm going to try to edit it and put it in here somewhere where it makes sense. Not really important, just an observation on my part, but it might at least solve one mystery here. And that is this whole character of this J.J. McC. What's he even doing in here? And it occurred to me when I was doing some research on McClure's magazine, I wonder if it is paying homage to S.S. McClure, who was a co-founder of McClure's magazine and its editor up until around 1911 or something like that. And I wonder if when they were writing this, they just kind of thought, you know, McClure's magazine is one of the big sponsors of this contest here, so maybe we can get a little extra foot in the door here. And so I wonder if they just kind of stuck this J.J. McC in there as a tip of the hat to S.S. McClure. And I bet that's right, because look how upset he seems to be with me here. So I bet that's what it is. If you are an Ellery Queen fan, have you ever heard that? Does he even appear in any of the future novels or not? That might explain why this odd extra layer with the J.J. McC character. All right, sorry about that, folks. Back to the video. But now that takes us into part 4 and the conclusion. So let's see what happens. So everything in part 4 happens pretty quickly. It does cover 4 days, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So the investigation happens over a course of 9 days. Pretty quick, I think, for a full-blown murder investigation. But the book isn't all that long, so it's got to be just a matter of days. Ellery never shows up in this last part. He's gone off to Maine to go fishing, and that's it. He does send a telegram to his dad over the weekend, and he says something in there. I won't say what it was, and you wouldn't know what it meant anyway. It's only revealed at the end. But there's some communication that seems to happen all through the book between Inspector Queen and Ellery. There's almost like a telepathic something. Ellery says something abstract. Richard Queen understands what he means and then can act upon that. And that's what happens with this telegram. So in a very action-packed conclusion, we have a capturing of the murderer, and then afterwards, Inspector Queen invites all the police detectives and cops over to his apartment, where he can explain the whole thing to them and us, the readers. And very happy ending. Ellery never shows back up again. I'll give you one spoiler alert. He never gets his hands on that first edition. Maybe he does in a future book somewhere. I don't know. But so that wraps up the case. And so now we've got almost 100 years of cover art to talk about. So we'll try to move through that quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. I will just go in chronological order here of publication, starting with the first edition. You've gotten a preview of this already when I was holding that facsimile up throughout the video. But we don't have a credited artist here, so no background on that. But we do have that very bold two-color printing process that was very typical of book jackets back in those days. Printing was simple, generally line art. Once in a while you would have a halftone photograph maybe, but usually not. So they were very simple and cheap to be printed. And this one is nice and clean, not all that sophisticated, but of course the hat, the top hat, makes sense right up front there with the type on it. That works well. But I really like the icon of the playing card of the Queen of Diamonds here for a couple of reasons, and they're similar. There are two queens. There is Inspector Richard Queen and Ellery Queen. So there are those two main detectives, which is a nice metaphor here because the playing card can be switched right side up, upside down, whatever. Equal billing for each of the two detectives. Or, and I think this is probably the main reason, it's for the two authors that wrote as Ellery Queen, and that is Dannay and Lee. And that reminds me of one more thing that I wish I had mentioned earlier, but I'll just put it in here with the cover art because the playing card reminded me of it. As I said, I was having trouble getting to like the character in the story of Ellery Queen. And the fact that he is also the writer, supposedly the writer of the story, really threw me because I liked the narrator of the book. The narrator wrote well, it was interesting, entertaining, moved right along, all the characters were really fleshed out. Doesn't seem like the narrator is the same voice as the character of Ellery Queen in the story. Seems like two completely different people. If Ellery Queen is writing the story himself, and the character Ellery Queen is supposed to be the same guy, I wonder why he's not writing it in the first person. It's all third person. Just doesn't make any sense going back, looking at it now. What we get as the character, that kind of in the background character all the time of Ellery Queen, does not seem like the same guy who's actually writing the story named Ellery Queen. All right, book cover number 2. This is the earliest paperback edition that I could find of the Roman Hat Mystery, the 1940 Pocketbooks edition, with the cover artist Alan Pope, who did a lot of the cover art for pocketbooks in those days. And the layout of the cover matches so many of the paperback books from Pocket that were on the newsstands in those days. I believe the face we're looking at there is the murder victim himself, Monty Field. And then those big drops that are coming down, I believe that is supposed to be the poison that killed him. Then we see, kind of secondarily, on top of that, we see like a line art outline of a top hat. And that's a pretty straightforward cover, but it was in color, and so it was differentiated from the two-color hardback edition. This next one is interesting, I think. We're back to a hardcover now, which is kind of unusual, going from hardcover to paperback back to hardcover again. But this one was published by Triangle Books in 1942, and I think it's a little crude in its execution, but it's really interesting. The colors are darker, but we do have colors. We got 4-color now instead of just the 2-color process like we're used to seeing in those days. But because it's set in a theater, we get the masks of comedy and tragedy there. And I like the way that it's done here. The tragedy, the skeleton hand coming out through the mouth of the one mask there. Now, there's no skeletons in the story. It's just a symbol of death, which makes sense. But then I like the fact that we are looking kind of at a downward angle of the comedy mask. So it's not really funny. Instead, that it looks like an evil smile, the way those eyes are kind of downcast and kind of creasing together there. So I really like this as an early execution, just symbolically. Now, the illustrator here is Paul Galdone. He was born in Budapest in 1907, and he came to the U.S. in 1921 and studied art in New York City, like so many others that came here and got into this line of work. But he's probably best known today as being the original illustrator for the children's books of Basil of Baker Street, which was the story of a little detective mouse that lived in the basement at 221B Baker Street. And then back to paperbacks again, pocketbooks once more. And this was published in 1947. And again, with the theater masks here, I don't think they are done as cleverly as the one we were just looking at here. And we've got each mask wearing a top hat. So there was one missing top hat, but there, in a way, there were two top hats in the story, one of which lent some confusion to the search for the top hat in a couple of ways. Won't go into that, but it makes sense that each mask here would get its own topper. Now, there is a signature for an artist on here, but to me, it's completely illegible. So if we zoom in down here, see if you can make that out at all. I've seen that signature on a couple of other books from these days, and I never see a credit actually listed, and I just can't make it out. If you know who it is, please leave a comment and let me know, and maybe I can look into that a little bit more. And now back to another hardback edition. This one's got a cover by Leo Manzo, who I talked a little bit more about. I won't go into it in this video here, but I talked more about his artwork in a video I did for a Dr. Gideon Fell novel, The Crooked Hinge. I'll leave a link to it in the notes down below in case you're interested in it. But if not, just know that this particular hardback for the Roman Hat Mystery was published by Tower Books. That was an imprint of the World Publishing Company. And again, with the skeleton hand, like I say, there's no skeletons in the story here, just a symbol of death, naturally, and the top hat there that goes missing. But here we get the two ticket stubs, and those were a couple of clues that they were very careful in the opening part of the book to everyone in attendance to make sure that they had their ticket stub, because that way they could see who may have been sitting in that seat next to the murder victim, and then who is holding that ticket stub would likely be the murderer, or at least an accomplice. And just the detail here, they got the actual seats correct, as mentioned in the story, and we get to see that the tickets were $4.40 plus 40 cents for a federal tax. That's a lot of detail to cram into just a book cover piece of art here. But that's a total of $4.80, and I looked it up back in 1923, $4.80, and that's for a far left back row orchestra seat. That $4.80 in today's money would be about $82. So is that about what it costs for an off-Broadway ticket these days? I wonder if that's comparable. Now, this next one, we're back to pocketbooks again. They seem to have gotten the lion's share as far as paperback licensing for the Roman Hat Mystery, and a lot of the Ellery Queen books were practically always pocketbooks in the early years. But now we go to 1962, and again, no artist is listed here, but it does have that distinctive pocketbook cover there, where you had some form of like a silver metallic ink that ran down the side of the cover and around the spine. This is our spiciest cover that we get of all the covers that we're looking at here. But we're getting a scene that just never happens. There's no woman in the story that is accosted. There is a femme fatale that they could have used here, but none of this kind of action here takes place in the book at all. But it's still an interesting cover, and they probably just did this just to sell more books. Unless, I guess it could be, if you really stretch it, it could be a scene from the play, Gunplay, but we're never given any kind of a description like that from the performance itself. Now, just a few years later, 1967, the licensing is switched now to Signet books for paperbacks. And I don't remember this specific cover, but these are the line of Ellery Queen paperback books that I remember mostly when I think of paperback Ellery Queen books. This is the series that I remember with that particular type style and the boxed in illustration for that book. There was only one version of this cover. I'm putting two side by side here so I could open up that really dark illustration so you can see some detail there. That's a skull floating over a theater seat, if you can't tell. But I'm not sure what kind of a skull that is. Again, there's no skeletons in this story, but if you're going to show a human skull, is this human? What's with the bony ridge on the top of the head? And I don't know what's going on with those kind of random silver teeth in that ghastly grin there. Not sure why that is when just a regular skull, I think, might have got the same message across. And then we can see in the opened up version on the right there that there's a seat on either side of that main seat. That's not completely accurate. I'm getting in the weeds here, but that's just what I do. The murder victim, Monty Field, was sitting on the very last seat on the far aisle in the back of the orchestra section. So there was not a seat on either side of him. Nobody cares about that but me. But when I see things like that, I just have to mention it or I can't sleep at night. Now we move ahead 12 years to 1979, and we're still with Signet, but now it's specifically the Signet Mystery imprint. And no more illustration now, it is a photographic treatment. We have no photo credit or design credit for this, but I still think it's pretty interesting. Now, at first, it looks like it might be some kind of a magic trick going on. There is no magic performed in the stage play in the book at all. So it's strictly symbolic. But we do have the missing top hat, so and it did have something hidden inside. So that kind of makes sense here. We understand the top hat already. But there was not money. There was not cash money in the top hat. There was blackmail involved, but not literal money. So that again, is just symbolic. It is a nice, clean design, though, and I like that it's specific to the actual story. A lot of times you'll get these mystery stories that might have a picture of the detective on the cover that could work just as well on any other book with that same character on it. Or sometimes it's maybe it's like a blood stain or something that could be for any detective story. I like it when the cover art is specific to the story. And we really get that in spades or whatever suit of playing cards the Queen card is in this next one here, which is by Hamlin. This is the first trade paperback of the batch here, and it was published in 1981. And I usually like these still lives where they get it right. And you can tell by looking at this one that some art director or photographer took some time with getting the proper props and it's accurate to 1920s in most cases or earlier, which could have still been in fashion or in common use in 1923. And it's mostly specific to things in the actual story, and it's actually not bad, but while it's on the screen, let's pick it apart a little bit anyway. Now, again, some of these don't make a difference, but some might once you notice them. You tell me. The opera glasses there are no opera glasses mentioned in this story, but they could still probably be appropriate. The topper is right, of course. That's the right top hat. The bundle of papers could be right. I imagine them as floppier, but this still works. The flask is fine. There was a flask in the story, and that was involved with the murder victim. The ticket is good. There were definitely ticket stubs involved. I don't remember gloves being mentioned, but sure, why not? It's probably typical for formal evening wear out to the theater in those days, or for keeping fingerprints off of things. But brown, if you're wearing the black topper and the black evening wear, brown gloves, I don't know. And then there's that bottle of poison. There was poison, but it was a strange brew of poison. It would not have had a bottle marked with the skull and crossbones on it. But there was poison, so I'll give that to him. And again, just symbolic, I guess. Then the walking stick. There was no walking stick. That was kind of clear, but I guess you would expect to maybe see a walking stick, but isn't this walking stick kind of short? Where does that shaft go after it ducks under the poison? And wouldn't you see it sticking out under the hat brim and then running off the edge of the cover? Maybe it is a magic hat. It does disappear in the story after all. Now, this next one, the last one, is brand new. It only came out on February 4th, just not even 2 months ago. But this is the new Kindle cover. And so if you buy this today as an ebook, this is probably the cover art that you're going to get. And I do think this is a really nice looking cover. I really like the typography, although I wouldn't mind if it had been a little more deco, a little more 1920s style. But I think the typography is fine. It's nice and flourishy. It's very attention-getting. If I had been art director, I probably would have tightened up the space between those two little E's and the big N next to it in the word Queen up at the top. But other than that, it's just all wrong. This is supposed to be a silk top hat, not some kind of a fedora. Granted, it looks good on the cover, but that's not what the hat is. Maybe whoever the illustrator was here thought that was a Roman hat. Maybe that was in fashion, the type of hat that was in fashion in Rome in 1920 or something. Maybe it was, but that's not what Roman hat means in the title of the book. Then I don't know what the inspiration is for all the green leaves and the green hat band. I don't know what that is. And then I'm not sure what that background is supposed to be. Is that supposed to be some kind of a symbol of death? Is that like a plaque on some kind of a mausoleum or a grave or something? I don't know. And then I up at the top you can see that little crown. I guess that would stand in for Queen. That would make sense. But what's the little cube at the bottom with the hole in it? Is that, if it is like a gravestone or something, is that where you would put the stem of a flower in that? I don't know. That seems like an odd little added detail for such an obscure image. I don't know. What do you think? All right, I think this is a video a little longer than I expected, but I'm going to just do one more thing here and run a gallery of all the covers past you here so you can take one more look at all of them. And then as they're sliding by, maybe you can tell me if you have a favorite out of all of these, and let me know in the comments which that one would be and why you like it. Or maybe tell me which one you like the least. There might be some candidates for that. Or maybe tell me if you have ever read the Roman Hat Mystery yourself. Or if you're a longtime Ellery Queen fan, maybe you have another favorite Ellery Queen book. Let me know about that. Or are you a novice to Ellery Queen yourself and you're only now going to read your first Ellery Queen book ever because you've enjoyed this video so much? Or maybe tell me, are you any good at solving mysteries like these kinds of books? I don't think I am that good at it. I always have lots of theories, but let me know how well you do at these. All right, folks, so there you have it. And thanks for sticking with me through all of this. And I want to thank just one more time the hosts and co-hosts of March Mystery Madness. And one last reminder, if you're interested in that Google map and run around Manhattan and chase down the murder victim here, I'll leave a link to that down below. And so I guess I will say hats off to you. And until the curtain rises again, thanks a lot. Hollow statue?